Hi, I'm Brenda.
And I'm Elaine.
We're sisters.
Welcome to the Body Wealth Podcast, a space for conversations about the wealth that really matters, your best health. In the Black community, many parents viewed an attention deficit hyperactivity disorder diagnosis with suspicion. And we get it, because we know the harm that our children have suffered from being labeled and dismissed. But it is time to end the stigma associated with ADHD, a condition that affects millions of children and adults.
In today's episode, Krista Bradley, who was diagnosed with ADHD as an adult, talks to us about why she views it as a superpower. So how are you doing today, Krista?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Really, really good. For a variety of reasons, my dad is going to be staying with us for a few weeks, but it's a good thing because I just love, making his breakfast and talking to him over breakfast and having him around. You and I have known each other since college. You are such a joy to know, just a light in my life. And I could say lots about you, but we want to give you a chance to introduce yourself to our listeners. Just tell us what you would like to share about yourself.
Oh, sure. Thank you, Brenda. I feel the same way about you. My name is Krista Bradley. I am 59 years old. I live in the Washington, D.C. area. I've made my career working in the performing arts industry, and I'm married, and I've been married for 25 plus years.
Wow.
And we have a dog, a black lab named Lucy.
Lucy. Well, congratulations on that 25 years of marriage. You got a good one.
I did.
So many times folks rail against things like diagnoses of ADHD. And I've heard you say that your ADHD is a superpower. So why do you say that?
Well, ADHD is definitely a gift. There are people, particularly Ned Hallowell, who's been such a champion of ADHD and people those who have ADHD, adults in particular, as well as children, talks about ADHD as having a supercharged brain. You kind of have this race car brain. For me, at least, I tend to connect things really quickly. I see patterns quickly. I'm deeply intuitive. I feel like when you have ADHD, the normal way of air quotes, way of thinking doesn't really, it's not part of the way that you look at the world, right? Mm-hmm. So you tend to see solutions that are creative and not traditional. And I love that. I love not being traditional. I love being able to see things that connect dots that other people can't. And we're sometimes rare, although it seems like I just am meeting more and more people with adult ADHD. My husband has ADHD. We discovered that. Some of my closest friends do. So many people in the arts and the creative industries do. So we're everywhere, and that's a gift to humanity.
Amen.
For sure it is. And it's sad in many ways that we have defined something as normal, because everything's a spectrum. There is no, way to be on any. And I think we're learning that now, but we've created a society that doesn't appreciate it. So
it's so true. I'm glad that we're where we are now, but that wasn't necessarily the case growing up.
No.
Right. And certainly the evolution of, in my 20s, 30s, 40s, because I didn't get a diagnosis until mid 40s. So
wow.
Just living that
how
way.
Did you get to that diagnosis?
Well, Elaine, it was sort of an aligning of the stars. It feels like my mother had died, and I was dealing with a great deal of depression. And my physician suggested that I go on Wellbutrin, and I did. And after 2 weeks, I was in a new position, in a job, and I found myself being very calm and very focused and accomplishing my tasks in a way that just felt very easy, and I thought, well, gosh, maybe it's the new job. Like, I'm doing things that are that I really like. So that was one kind of inkling. And then a very good friend of mine talked about this book called Delivered from Distraction, which is written by Ed Hallowell and John Ratey. And it really kind of lays out ADHD as a diagnosis and talks a lot about different case studies of people, how they manage their ADHD. But one of the biggest sections was just a 125 questions that range from general questions to really specific ones. And I went back and looked at the book and I checked off like 90 of the 125. and some of them were really funny. Like, are you chuckling while you're actually doing this quiz because you're wondering why I know you so well? It's great. And just that was such a big opening door for me. And then I started learning more about ADHD. And when you think you might have it, what are some ways to navigate that and getting an official diagnosis, and looking at coaches and looking back at your history? That's such an important part of ADHD diagnosis. So I did all of it, as an ADHD person sometimes goes full hog, right?
Super focused on that.
Super focused on that. I've got all these books I've read. And then it turns out that right around the corner from my house is a place called the ADHD Chesapeake Center. It was focused on the study of ADHD for adults and kids. So this is why I say the stars were a bit of aligned.
Right.
And I went there and they showed me how to look back at my school records and report cards and comments that my teachers would say.
Oh.
And so we did, and it was so funny. Krista is so bright. It's just that she constantly talks with people next door. If she could just focus, if she could just not be so squirmy, but she's a delight to have in class. That was kind of just the
theme all the way through, right?
Yeah, right. And I just thinking about teachers even in middle school saying, gosh, you'd forget your head if it wasn't screwed on to your neck, because
That's
I was
not nice.
No, it wasn't nice. But just, I was forgetting things all the time. My parents were always bringing things to school because I was, I would forget things. I would forget I had an assignment. I would forget my books in a class. So just kind of seeing those patterns along the way and cramming for projects, not being able to sit and focus for a couple of hours after school. So just finding those patterns, and even as a young adult, thinking about that. So all those
just more confirmation.
Yeah, more confirmation. And the ADHD Center basically said, yeah, you definitely have it, and let's figure out ways to manage it. So that was great. It was such a relief to know that I wasn't stupid, or I didn't have a lot of drive, or I just couldn't seem to stay focused and do things like other people.
But had you thought those things? Had you thought I'm stupid or I don't have drive?
I had. I mean, it was not easy to get through college, and I didn't do it in the 4 years. I had to go back and finish because I just couldn't get it together, and sort of stay focused. And with projects at work, I was always doing things last minute. It was really hard to just kind of meter out projects. And that always felt horrible, right? Not being able to, even when your intent is there, but sometimes you're just not following through on that.
Especially watching other people around you doing it and saying, hey, how come I can't?
Right.
But that's what I believe, like the system is designed, especially the educational system, for one type of kid, right? One type of person, even in the work world, right? Oftentimes, not always. And so I think it's great that hopefully we're evolving past that. So no teacher's going to say to a kid, you'd forget your head if it wasn't screwed on. That's not nice.
That's so not nice.
You were able to thrive despite not really having systems that were designed for the way your brain works.
That's so true.
That's another testament to your sort of drive and intelligence and wonderfulness.
Thank you. I also think my parents they just were so encouraging, and they knew I was bright. I mean, what is that test that they give you? My IQ was just like off the charts.
Yeah.
So they knew she's got, her brain's fast. She's doing all these things. And they were very encouraging, which was fantastic,
That's
and
great.
Yeah.
Not a
basically you
lot
can
of
do
parents are.
anything.
They're not like
No.
screaming at you not to forget. My son has ADHD, as you know. And so I used to buy 10 pairs of gloves at the beginning of winter because I was so over getting frustrated about lost gloves. I was like, okay, what we're going to change is the availability of gloves. We're not going to scream about why we've lost another pair. And just little things like that helped me.
Exactly. And just being able to shift, just a quarter of the way. It's like, oh, let's not get upset about the loss. Let's figure out ways to mitigate how challenging it is to keep all of them. So I have lots of gloves because of that.
Minimize frustration.
Minimize frustration.
And it's not hard, those things, but sometimes as parents, we need to be taught or, shown the way, because that's just not the way that our society has defined things at this point. So did you ever see a medical professional, after you realized that you had this? Did you feel the need to see one? So how did medicine or medical profession come into play for you?
Well, the Wellbutrin was really kind of, and still remains, the only medication that I'm on. I did talk to my primary care physician about having ADHD, and she said, you could go to a psychiatrist. I have high blood pressure, so she was really adamant about me not getting onto stimulants. And most of the medication then, like in 10, 15 years ago, seemed to be very stimulant focused.
Yeah.
So I just took the path of least resistance. I'm like, well, I'm not going to do that. Wellbutrin seems to be helping. The behavior modification and coaching and putting together systems all really helped me figure out different ways to work, right? So I work better in spurts. I have a Pomodoro timer on my computer. So I work in 20, 25-minute increments, and then I take a break. I know that exercise is really important for me. It helps me clear my brain, and it works really well. My coach at the time that I first got diagnosed helped me understand how long things take and to track my time and to block my time in a way. And it was like I was given a magic eyeglasses. So all of a sudden I was seeing the way that my day could work in a different manner and how I could work in a different manner just by having those tools. So that was really, really helpful. And just even like financial management. How do I kind of keep track of paper? And how do I set time aside for that kind of task? So those kind of structural things were amazing. Over time, I started subscribing to other journals around ADHD. There's a great chapter here in the DC area, Chad, and subscribe to Attitude Magazine, which is also a great monthly or bi-monthly magazine around ADHD issues and management and stories. So I've learned a lot. So that's a long answer to your question, that the medical profession, we were consultative, but really it was learning about all these other supports, psychological counseling, the psychological coaching, the other resources that exist. And then also diet and nutrition. That's been really important for me. Like sugar, not good for ADHD. For at least for me, it's horrible. And
Did you learn that through just your research and these organizations and your reading?
Yeah, in my experience, I would know if I had sugar, cookies, gluten, dairy. It was like someone had turned on a channel and there was static. And it was just really harder to kind of stay focused. And so I learned that I probably shouldn't really do sugar, and I need to have a lot of protein in the morning. And meditation has also helped me a great deal with ADHD.
How would someone who was feeling like they might have ADHD get to these resources?
Yeah, well, I speak so highly about CHADD, which I don't even know what it stands for. It's CHADD, but I think it's the National Association.
We'll link
for
to it. Yeah, we'll
ADHD,
link to it in the resources.
And then at Hallowell's work, and he's got several centers around the country, are great resources, newsletters, email, blogs have been fantastic. And recently I've discovered a whole bunch of podcasts around ADHD and adult ADHD, and they're hilarious. And poke fun at all the things that are wonderful and crazy in a good way, about having this kind of brain and what it means and ways to kind of get around certain things and lean into the beauty of an ADHD brain. So I think that there are lots of resources now and a lot of stories that are highlighted that show people the range, because ADHD doesn't manifest itself in all the same ways. My husband has more inattentive ADHD, whereas mine is a little bit hyper. I'm also an extrovert, so it comes out like in so many different ways. And I think that's really important that we understand the spectrum of how this manifests. But I'm so happy that there are more resources now. And I wish the medical profession would connect the dots a little bit around how does ADHD affect other parts of your physical well-being with nutrition and with exercise and just being aware. And also, how can the frontline folks, if you have a nurse practitioner or other people that you're dealing with, that they understand the signs and
react differently.
React differently. And I wish the world, whether it's the office space or your physician or other people, were better educated about how this manifests itself so that they might suggest things. The only reason I even thought about ADHD was because a friend told me about this book. And she suggested that maybe this is something you should read. And I just wish there were other people that were hyper aware that this is a potential, and there are more people that have it, particularly adults who don't know that they have it. That there was some more intervention there.
I mean, it makes me feel like I wonder when you talk about that, like for kids whose parents don't have it and who just are depending on the medical profession when they see their kids struggling in certain ways. Back then, it was like if somebody thought your kid had some sort of issue like that, it was automatically medicine, took them in and they were like, oh, they need to be on this drug so we can keep them in the classroom doing what everybody else is doing. And I think all those resources are great and they need to be hopefully addressed towards parents as well.
Yes, that's so important. And ADHD is often hereditary. So that's how a lot of, I think, adults and parents have realized it's like, oh, well, I do that, but I just thought that was kind of whatever,
Or I tried to hide it, or, I tried to,
And it manifests itself in different ways. My mother definitely had it. Most definitely had it,
did she know it?
No. She had no idea. So she was charming, she was witty, she was smart, she was quick on her feet in any kind of situation, but she would lose things all the time. And she would find it in the pocket of her dressing gown. Like, why would you put that in the, you're not thinking about these things. So I also think that it's great insight for adults who maybe you have it, maybe your parent had it, but it does tend to follow hereditary lines. So it's a great way to discover and learn about, and maybe, understand and connect things for yourself. And as you're also trying to navigate and help support your kid.
And this is why I think it's important for us to talk to friends and family, because something I'm seeing in this podcast so much is we don't often talk about our physical/mental struggles with the people closest to us. And not only is the genetic factor an important, like, oh, if I, as your mom, am dealing with this, you might be dealing with it too. But also, as you said, your friend gave you the book about ADHD. So, being able to share resources and help friends along the way, we can only do that if we talk to each other.
Yeah, and that's sometimes really hard. I have not been super out about my ADHD diagnosis, although recently I just drop it in conversation. I was talking to the alumni VP yesterday, Brenda of our alma mater, and I just said, well, I have ADHD, so it's very easy for me to get excited about a number of things. And I was surprised how easy for me it was.
I love that.
Right. And I was proud of it. It's like, yeah, it's not a stigma.
And thank you for doing that and for being on this podcast, because I think we need to reduce the stigma so that more parents
Yes.
can think about, oh, is this something I should look into for my child or myself? I think the
And
stigma
all parents
people's
should
ways.
be trying to figure out what is the best way to help their child be successful. And
Exactly.
because every child is different. And so
Right.
that needs just to be the baseline for everybody.
And
Exactly.
sometimes medicine is needed, so different
Yes.
kids need different things. But I love that it sounds like you, once you had the diagnosis, did some experimenting to figure out what helps or hurts
Mhm.
with your ability to focus or manage your ADHD.
Yeah, I think that empowerment and self-empowerment is really important. So knowing that you are a unique individual that may or may not respond to different things, that's the beauty of being human, right? So embrace that and approach it with curiosity. It's like, I wonder how I might respond to this, or I wonder if this will be a good thing for me. And that's a way to kind of go on the journey and also have the kind of self-efficacy that you need as an individual navigating a health issue.
Any health issue.
Any health issue, right? Exactly. And being a woman of color, I don't know that there were a lot of stories and models of other women of color with ADHD. Like, that's just not something I remember I've seen a lot actually at all. So I'm really happy to be one. I'm very happy to advocate for other women because ADHD manifests itself differently in women. And I'm happy to be a woman of color advocating for other women who may or may not have ADHD, or maybe have an inkling that they might, and that it's a gift, and you can navigate it really well, and it can work to your advantage in your life.
And that's why we're glad that you agreed to come on the podcast, because I think your voice and your positive message will serve so many people. So thank you for that.
Happy to do it. I take some supplements. I discovered something called Omega Bright, which is a supplement that has a lot of omega-3s in it. And that really helps me. So because I don't want to take medication, and it's hard to find the right medication for me because I have high blood pressure. I think now there are many more options, but I have ADHD, so I've been procrastinating, figuring out like what that might be. But for now, it works just fine. All the other things that I'm doing with the Wellbutrin, which I'm still on.
How does the Omega Bright help you?
It gives me clearer focus, particularly in the morning. I find that there's just a added fine tuning of sharpness. Like if I were, do we have these anymore? If you had a tuner and I was digitally tuning
On the radio,
it's like it just takes the dial a little bit to the right. And so it's a little sharper.
Highlights the importance of being in tune with your body and noticing things about yourself. And some people do it, I think, more naturally than others, but it's important to try to develop that skill to listen to your body. And
yes, for sure, Elaine. And meditation, I think meditation has helped me do that. That was not something that I was very good about. It, sometimes with ADHD, you're just kind of riding the wave and the crest of things in the moment, and having the ability to stop and use your breath to kind of check in. That's been a game changer for me. And I really embraced the whole power of meditation to be much more present in your life, but also just to have a better sense of how you're doing and asking yourself, what do you need today? It's really helpful. I wish I had discovered it earlier, but
how did you learn how to meditate?
I use the Calm app. There are so many great apps out there. I tried doing it on my own and that just didn't work.
That's good. And I also wanted to give you a chance to shout out the other ADHD podcasts that you listen to. If it's helping you, maybe it'll help somebody else.
Oh, yes. It's like my crazy ADHD brain is what it is. There's a whole list on healthline.com, which I use a lot for other things, that has a list of the best ADHD podcasts. Just to go back, CHAD is Children and Adults with Attention Deficit Disorder, which is the organization that I discovered
So things are changing in terms of perceptions and, understanding
Absolutely.
around this, that's great news. And we need to keep moving in that direction for sure.
Yes. Another one, just a podcast, the Faster Than Normal podcast, which is hilarious. And it's all success stories, people with ADHD, from CEOs to artists, rock stars, et cetera, just to kind of normalize and make it visible. So, yeah. Anyway,
and to show that it's a superpower.
It is a superpower. It is a superpower.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I want to talk about money for a minute.
Oh, yes.
You mentioned that
Stigma.
You mentioned that you had an ADHD coach. Was that someone through the center or someone else? And also, does your insurance pay for it?
I got a referral to the ADHD coach through that center for Chesapeake Center. There is a site for ADHD coaching that, if you just did a Google search, where you can find a coach in your area. Mine was not covered by insurance at the time. I have not been with a coach for a while, so I don't know if more of them are covered under insurance. I hope so, because it was really expensive to go to that center. And, it was easy and right there and convenient for me. I'm glad that I had the resources to be able to do that, but many, many people don't, and nor should they have to.
Right.
So yeah, that's a thing. That is definitely a thing. Given that it's ADHD is a medical diagnosis and a cognitive diagnosis, I think that's what the right way to talk about it. It should be covered, just like behavioral health is.
Yes.
So
the coaches, they're not doctors. Are they like therapists?
Some are therapists, but they're trained. I mean, there is a very clear system and programming and path for official coaches that are endorsed by certain entities. So definitely look for someone that is endorsed. I know the Hallowell Center has a number of centers across the country, and then they have great referrals for coaches and other centers in the country. Yeah. And it's interesting, some of those coaches and programs they all have their different expertise, right? Some are designed for people of a particular generation. Some are focused on leaders who run organizations and entrepreneurs. I went to somebody for that because it's not easy when you're running an organization or, a CEO or an executive director, and just the kind of people that you need to have around you or systems. And, a coach was really helpful to help me think about how do I kind of surround myself.
That you have.
Let's talk about that for a minute. I'm curious, at work, what kind of people and or systems have you put in place to complement what you bring to make you do your best work?
Right. So my right-hand person and team members have always been folks that are very, very good project managers, super detailed, and have great follow-up and follow through. If you're the person that kind of gets everyone excited, paints the vision, inspires them on all the things that are possible, or pitches the idea, then your other person is the person that follows up, writes the note or drafts the note for you so you can actually edit it and then get it off, tracks your calendar, make sure that you're following up on all the different details, because I lose track of that. That's just something that I'm not super good at.
It's not interesting to you.
It's not interesting. I've gotten a lot better with spreadsheets and tracking budgets. I mean, that's a skill that I've learned, and I've learned how to hone, and that's been great. But having someone whose brain is wired in that way to help move projects along and to make sure that they're on track is so important. And what I bring, it's like, oh, here's the idea. Here are the ways that it can connect to other things. Here are the people that you should be talking to. Now help me do that.
Every team who wants to do anything needs people who have complementary skill sets. Nobody needs a team that has everybody who has the same skill. So, I mean, that it's just normal and every day, but, we don't think of it as that.
That's right.
And, I mean, it's going back to diversity, because historically people hire and recruit people who are like
I like
them.
them. Yes,
Because that's what's
exactly.
comfortable. And, it's the smart leader that realizes, no, I need to not hire people who are like me. So you're a smart leader.
Oh, thank you.
So what other lessons from your experience with ADHD might you want to share with other Black women who might be wondering if they have ADHD?
Don't be afraid to explore the unknown. It's hard when you have an inkling or you have a sense that you can't really explain that something might be different or off. Our intuition is very, very strong. As women, as Black women, I believe that we have an additional layer of intuition that's ancestral and that is generational. And that's a beautiful thing. So don't be afraid to lean into that and explore that. I think that's really important. There is also the stigma around being Black women leaders. We have to be twice as good to get half as much, always feeling like you have to have everything perfect.
Right. And be perfect.
And be perfect and not be able to falter. And there can be a lot of stigma and self-beratement around that. And it's even more important to care for yourself, knowing that you might have this superpower, special brain, and to treat yourself in a way that is kinder and gentler and allows you to be the full person that you want to be without stigma. So don't let fear get in the way.
I love it. I love it.
And we all have different strengths and weaknesses. We all just have to understand that we should lean into our strengths and, depend on others in the areas where we need help. And that's true for everyone.
Exactly. And I think if you do have ADHD as a woman, if you're comfortable, make yourself visible. We have been invisible in so many places. And I feel like we are in this era of being seen and known, and our voices are even more powerful. Well, they've always been powerful, but I think more people are paying attention.
Listening.
And listening. So that's really important, is to use your voice, to be seen and know that that's making a difference for somebody else. And we do that all the time anyway, as women and Black women. We might do that in our careers or in our community. We need to advocate and be seen from a health standpoint too, so that others know that it's okay that we exist and that people are thriving.
And we exist fully in many ways.
Exactly.
And we thank you for doing that with us on this podcast. Yeah. We have a couple of questions that we usually ask people at the end. So
sure. It's my pleasure. This has been a lot of fun.
Good. Let's see. On a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel today?
9.
Yay!
Yes,
Tell us why.
I have taken a day off today. I'm talking to you about things that I'm passionate about, and realizing and sharing this story that it's empowering to me to be able to share that and to maybe inspire somebody else. We have family coming to visit. I'm really excited about that. Yeah, life is good.
That's great. And who or what inspires you to work towards your best health?
Oh, well, my parents definitely inspired me. They're no longer here, but my dad was a public health physician and my mother was a consumer advocate in her own way and in her volunteer work. And both of them championed wellness, and wellness in a very holistic way, and that you really only have one life. So I think that they inspired me, and you two inspire me actually for taking this on for your own individual paths with your health, and how you've turned all of that and that passion and challenge into something that's a gift for all of us. So thank you for doing this and for realizing how much it's needed and for championing women's health.
Thank you, Krista. Thank you.
What I take away from this conversation with Krista is the importance of making space for everybody. We know each human being is unique, and we celebrate that because that's the beauty of humanity. But when society defines as normal a narrow portion of the spectrum of possibility in one human characteristic, it really limits us all. Those people outside of that normal range have a harder life and they're not supported. And the society as a whole misses out on their brilliance.
And I'm happy that as a society, we get to benefit from Krista's brilliance. I think that's partly because her parents protected her confidence. They saw her challenges and her strengths. They allowed her to thrive. And we can all do that as parents. You know, my son also has ADHD. And when he was in second grade, I asked his teacher, "Do you think Evan has ADHD?" And she said, "There's no way he has ADHD. He's so smart." Fortunately, today, most folks know that being smart and having ADHD are not mutually exclusive. But it wasn't that long ago that teacher said those things. So when successful people like Krista talk about their ADHD, we increase awareness and reduce the stigma about this condition. For resources related to today's topic, please see the show notes or visit our website, bodywealthsisters.com. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at bodywealthsisters and to listen next week for the first in our 2-episode series on childbirth with Maya Gold Patterson. Thanks for listening. We hope this episode inspires you to increase your body wealth. If you like our show, please subscribe and tell a friend. The Body Wealth Podcast shares personal stories to inspire you. It does not constitute medical advice. For that, we encourage you to work with a trusted healthcare provider. We also want to remind you that the views expressed by our guests are their own.
This podcast is dedicated to our mother, Jean Fernandez Barbour, who showed us what advocating for yourself really looks like.